10 lost civilizations that existed before the Great Flood and were erased from history. In this episode, we will explore together 10 lost pre-flood civilizations scattered across 5 continents, from Turkey to Japan, from India to Bolivia, from Lebanon to South Africa, places carved in stone, submerged beneath oceans, or buried under entire mountains, all of them suggesting something extraordinary, that advanced human civilizations may have existed long before the timeline we are taught in official history. Across the world, we find massive structures that defy explanation, monuments built with astonishing precision, using techniques that, according to conventional history, should not have existed at the time. Some of these sites were destroyed, others were submerged by the sea. Many researchers believe they were lost during a global catastrophic event, long before recorded history began. But the mystery may go even deeper, because in many cases, these ancient places were not only destroyed, they were forgotten, buried, ignored, or quietly removed from humanity's collective memory, almost as if someone wanted this past to disappear. This is the forbidden history that almost no one talks about, a story scattered in ruins, hidden beneath oceans, and carved into ancient stone. And today, we begin to uncover it. Welcome to the channel, Mr. Jones, the Explorer. Let's explore. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey. Have you ever had the feeling that something doesn't quite add up? That the history you learned in school has a gap nobody wants to explain? Well, I'm Mr. Jones, the Explorer. I've been there, and today I'm taking you to a place that turned upside down everything mainstream archaeology thought it knew about the beginning of human civilization. We're talking about a temple more than 11,600 years old, built in southeastern Turkey, in the windswept hills of Göbekli Tepe. And the most disturbing part? It was constructed by people who, according to the academic handbook, simply shouldn't have been capable of doing it. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this with me. It's the year 9600 BCE. There is no writing, no metal, no wheel. According to everything we were taught, humans of that era were scattered nomads, surviving through hunting and gathering, without social structures complex enough to organize anything beyond a campfire. Now open your eyes, because what stands before you completely destroys that narrative. T-shaped limestone pillars, up to 6 meters tall, weighing between 10 and 20 tons, erected with surgical precision. These are not crude stones piled together. These are monuments carved with a mastery that would make even a modern sculptor stop and wonder. And it doesn't stop there, my friend. These pillars aren't smooth. They are covered with animal reliefs carved with astonishing delicacy. Foxes, lions, scorpions, vultures, serpents, more than 200 animal carvings spread throughout the complex, each showing anatomical details that reveal careful observation of nature. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who began excavations in 1994, was stunned by what he found. He spent decades trying to explain Göbekli Tepe, and to this day, the scientific community has not reached a consensus. What Schmidt knew for certain was that this site did not fit into any box archaeology had created up to that point. Now let me tell you the detail that keeps me awake at night. Across the entire archaeological site of Göbekli Tepe, covering 22 acres, with at least 20 stone circles mapped by ground-penetrating radar, archaeologists found absolutely no evidence of human habitation. No hearths, no domestic waste, no residential structures, nothing. The place was purely ceremonial. So tell me, how does a group of nomadic hunters, without a permanent base or established social hierarchy, organize a workforce of more than 500 people for decades to build a temple they wouldn't even live near within the model we were taught? That makes no sense. But wait, because there's another layer to this story, and it's even more intriguing. Around 8000 BCE, someone made a deliberate and systematic decision. Tons upon tons of sediment were used to bury the entire complex. This wasn't natural erosion. It wasn't structural collapse. It was intentional. Someone wanted to hide it. And here lies one of the most fascinating questions in modern archaeology. Why? Do you bury a sacred temple to preserve it, or to erase its memory? That question still has no official answer, and it haunts me every time I think about Göbekli Tepe. The official explanation offered by scholars and universities is honestly elegant, but incomplete. The theory suggests that large ritual gatherings at Göbekli Tepe created the need to feed hundreds of people, which may have driven the development of agriculture. In other words, religion may have come before agriculture, not the other way around, as we long believed. It's a massive conceptual shift, and it deserves recognition. But this explanation still leaves holes the size of a 20-ton pillar. How did these nomads possess the astronomical knowledge suggested at the site? How did they coordinate an engineering project lasting generations without any supporting urban structure? What intrigues me most is the absence of technical evolution in the sculptures. When a civilization develops a skill from scratch, you normally see the process. Crude early attempts, mistakes, a learning curve carved into stone. At Göbekli Tepe, that process doesn't exist. The oldest reliefs have the same precision as the newest ones. It's as if the knowledge arrived already complete, already mature, without the trial and error phase that human technological development usually requires. And that suggests something deeply unsettling. This may not be the beginning of something, but the echo of an ending. And that is exactly where the story becomes truly interesting, because Göbekli Tepe is not alone in this world. While you stand here looking at buried pillars in the heart of Turkey, the same question echoes in other parts of the planet, at sites equally inexplicable, equally ignored by the official narrative, equally submerged. And I mean submerged, not only in a figurative sense, because the next place we're going to visit together lies 30 meters beneath the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Japan, and what waits there will make Göbekli Tepe look like just a warm-up. If you enjoy investigating the mysteries that history has never fully explained, this channel was made for you. Subscribe to the channel. Here, each episode is a new piece of an ancient puzzle hidden in plain sight. Yonaguni Monument, Japan. I need to tell you about the day a diver changed everything, and he didn't even know what he was looking for. In 1987, Kihachiro Aratake was in the waters of the Pacific, near the small island of Yonaguni, at the southernmost edge of Japan, hunting hammerhead sharks for tourists. Yes, sharks. No ancient mysteries, no lost civilizations, just a guy doing his job on an ordinary day. But then, at 30 meters deep, the ocean floor suddenly stopped making sense. Instead of sand and irregular rocks, Aratake came across perfectly leveled terraces, 90-degree angles, symmetrical platforms, and stairways carved into the rock. He wasn't looking for hidden history, but hidden history found him. When I dove into the research on Yonaguni, and believe me, I spent weeks buried in academic papers and field reports about this place, what really intrigued me was the work of marine geologist Masaki Kimura from the University of the Ryukyus. This man dived at the site more than 100 times, over 15 years, documenting every centimeter of those unexplained structures. What he found challenges any comfortable explanation. 2 parallel megaliths, symmetrical staircases, flat platforms, stone blocks weighing up to 1,000 tons, arranged in levels like the terraces of a giant giant pyramid. But the detail that catches my attention the most were the post holes drilled directly into the submerged rock, with a symmetry and uniformity that nature simply does not produce. That's not geology, that's ancient technology. Now I need you to understand the scale of the problem here, because it's easy to hear submerged structure and not feel the weight of it. If the Yonaguni monument is artificial, and Kimura's evidence strongly suggests it is, then it was built when that area was still above sea level. When was that? Between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago, before the end of the last ice age, when the ocean was at least 40 meters shallower than it is today. That places this submerged city at least 8,000 years before any known Japanese civilization. 8,000 years, my friend. It's like finding a jet airplane inside an ancient Egyptian tomb. The math doesn't add up. The history we're told isn't correct. And when the numbers don't add up, it's because someone is using the wrong math, shaping history to suit their own interests. The official explanation, of course, tries to balance that equation another way. Geologists argue that sandstone naturally fractures at right angles, that waves and tectonic activity carved these shapes over millennia. It's rock, they say, not forbidden archaeology. I hear that argument, and I respect science, but there's a serious problem that no one can hide or refute. Natural erosion creates variation, irregularity, chaos. It doesn't produce steps with identical heights repeated across multiple terraces. It doesn't drill post holes into bedrock, and this is the fatal blow to the geological argument. It definitely doesn't construct an ancient circular astronomical alignment with standing stones nearby, reminiscent of Stonehenge, which has been documented submerged close to the main monument. Nature doesn't make Stonehenge, we do. What truly intrigues me, and I've investigated dozens of megalithic structures around the world, is not just the monument itself, but what it implies as a possibility. The coastal plains that were flooded between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago represent millions of square kilometers of territory that we simply stopped exploring because we assumed there was nothing there. Yonaguni may not be an isolated anomaly. It could be a surviving fragment of an entire advanced ancestral civilization, a sophisticated coastal culture that was literally swallowed by the sea at the end of the Ice Age, erased not by war, not by collapse, but by the raw force of nature, in an event that the survivors probably called a flood. Japanese authorities to this day have neither officially confirmed nor denied Kimura's conclusions. The site lies in restricted territorial waters, accessible only to authorized teams, and the academic debate remains, curiously, in a permanent stalemate. Convenient, isn't it? The monument is still there, 30 meters below the surface, with its perfect angles and unexplained holes, silently guarding the secrets of a forbidden history that someone, at some point, decided the world was better off not knowing. And while Yonaguni forces us to look down toward the ocean floor, there is another place, in Indonesia, that will force us to look into the earth itself, because buried beneath a seemingly ordinary hill in Java is something that may be the oldest human structure ever discovered on the planet, and what lies inside it will leave you speechless. Gunung Padang, Indonesia. Let me ask you a simple question. What do you see when you look at a vegetation-covered hill in the interior of Java, Indonesia? Most people see exactly that. a hill. But when I began studying Gunung Padang, I learned that the most extraordinary things in the world often hide behind completely ordinary appearances. The name means Mountain of Enlightenment in Sundanese, and the local people of West Java have always considered this place sacred, visiting it for centuries with offerings and prayers. But it was only in 2010 when geologist Danny Hillman Natawi-Jaja pointed ground-penetrating radar equipment at that seemingly innocent hill that the world began to understand why this place had never stopped being revered. Because Gunung Padang is not a hill, it is a pyramid, and it had been hiding in plain sight for millennia. I confess that when I first read Natawi Jaja's report, published in 2018, I had to stop, breathe, and reread everything carefully, because the numbers simply didn't fit in my head at first. The radar revealed underground chambers, corridors, and a pyramidal structure with at least 4 buried layers extending up to 90 meters below the surface. The most superficial layer, visible to the naked eye with its columnar basalt stones, was dated to around 3,500 BC. The second layer, buried deeper, goes back to around 8,000 BC. The third layer, between 12,000 and 13,000 BC, and then we reach the deepest layer, the one that made the international academic community choke, 20,000 to 22,000 years before Christ. This isn't conventional archaeology. This suggests a lost civilization operating during a period when, according to our textbooks, humanity barely knew how to chip stone. Now pause for a moment and think 20,000 years. At that time, according to official history, Homo sapiens were still in the middle of the last ice age, painting caves in Europe and hunting mammoths in Siberia. And yet in Java, someone may have been constructing the foundation of a 90-meter-tall pyramidal structure using a material that, when analyzed in the laboratory, appeared to be a geopolymer, a type of artificial cement created through the intentional combination of minerals. Organic material found within this cement was precisely dated. It was not natural volcanic rock. It was a manufactured mixture, similar to modern mortar, and produced by human hands 20 millennia ago. When I first read that, I was stunned, trying to process what it would mean for everything we think we know about ancient technology. The official explanation arrived quickly and with full force. Indonesian archaeologists and the National Heritage Conservation Center argued that the oldest dates reflect natural geological material, ancient lava flows, not human construction. According to them, the structure is a common volcanic hill with later megalithic additions at the top, made by more recent cultures. It's a hill, they say, not an inexplicable structure from an advanced ancestral civilization. But here is the problem that explanation struggles to resolve. Natawi-Jaja and his team did not collect samples from untouched bedrock. They extracted samples from artificial fill material, arranged stone layers, not random volcanic formations. And radar images show rectangular chambers, not irregular volcanic cavities. Nature does not carve perfect rectangles 90 meters underground. What truly intrigues me, and I've investigated many megalithic structures around the world, is the reaction of the Indonesian government over the years. At one point, excavations were halted by official order. Were they trying to hide something? Independent researchers were prevented from accessing the site freely. Why? What exactly lies buried in those underground chambers revealed by radar? If it is merely natural volcanic rock, there would be nothing to hide. But if Natawi-Jaja's dating is even partially correct, then Gunung Padang would be the oldest pyramid on Earth, built by a pre-flood civilization with advanced knowledge of engineering and material chemistry that humanity supposedly wouldn't develop for another 15,000 years. And do you know what is most unsettling about all of this? Gunung Padang is not alone. Around the world, across different continents and oceans, there are other places guarding the same kind of secret, structures that should not exist, built by people who, according to official history, should not have been capable of building them, places where humanity's hidden past was literally buried, submerged or forgotten. And one of those places lies on the other side of the world, on the western coast of India, where sacred texts, thousands of years old, describe in precise geological detail a magnificent city that once sank into the sea. And in the 2000s, modern sonar scans found it exactly where those texts said it would be. Dwarka, India. I've spent a good part of my life trying to understand the very thin line between myth and historical memory. When Hindu texts describe Dwarka, the golden city of Lord Krishna, with its shining gates, crystal palaces, and busy harbor, Western academia has often treated it as poetry, as spiritual allegory, as a people expressing their faith through grand metaphors. In my own years of training, I learned to separate sacred texts from archaeological evidence, as if they belonged to two worlds that never touched. But in 2000, when India's National Institute of Ocean Technology was conducting routine pollution surveys in the Gulf of Khambat on the country's western coast, sonar scans detected something on the ocean floor that made that line between myth and memory disappear completely. The city was there, exactly where the Hindu sacred texts said it would be. I remember the first time I studied the details of the discoveries in 2002. A team from the Archaeological Survey of India, using side-scan sonar and underwater photography, documented submerged structures at a depth of 36 meters, stone walls and foundations, what clearly appears to be a complex of buildings arranged in an urban grid pattern stretching across 8 kilometers. 8 kilometers of submerged city, my friend. For comparison, the historic center of Rome is roughly 3 kilometers in diameter. Submerged Dwarka is larger than Rome, and the artifacts recovered, ceramics, beads, fossilized wood, and worked stones, were dated. The fossilized wood returned a date of around 7,500 BC, truly incredible. Now I need you to feel the weight of what that number means within the larger context of this forbidden history we're uncovering together. 7,500 years before Christ. That places Dwarka as roughly contemporary with Göbekli Tepe, earlier than any known Mesopotamian city, earlier than any urban structure that conventional archaeology accepts as established civilization. And the detail that gives me chills every time I think about it is the specificity of the Mahabharata, one of the oldest Hindu sacred texts. When describing the city, it names the harbor, it describes the drainage system, it narrates the construction ordered by Krishna, and crucially describes the submergence of the city beneath the ocean after Krishna's death. This isn't a vague poetic apocalypse. It's a technical, geographical, sequential description of an advanced ancestral civilization being swallowed by the sea during a specific event. The official explanation naturally tries to contain the excitement. Skeptical geologists argue that the formations are natural rock outcrops, that the artifacts were deposited by underwater currents over thousands of years, and that the human mind is very good at finding patterns where there is only geology. And I understand that skepticism, it's necessary, it's healthy, it's part of the scientific process, but there's a point where skepticism begins to look more like denial than scientific rigor. That point comes when you have to explain why nature formed 90-degree angles in a grid pattern across 8 kilometers, why these natural outcrops include what clearly appear to be stone anchors and harbor pillars, and why sonar images reveal symmetry that geology simply does not produce. Archaeological mysteries are not solved by ignoring inconvenient evidence. What fascinates me and troubles me at the same time is the issue of access. Independent international teams have not been given full authorization to verify the discoveries made by the National Institute of Ocean Technology. The Indian government has neither fully endorsed nor officially rejected the conclusions. The site remains in a kind of deliberate academic and political limbo where the evidence exists, the reports have been published, but the final conclusion never quite arrives. And while the debate drags on through conferences and journals down there, 36 meters beneath the waters of the Gulf of Kambat, those structures continue to exist with the indifference of something that doesn't need our approval to be real. Hidden history doesn't disappear just because we decide to stop looking at it. And here is the question I've carried with me ever since I began studying Dwarka. If Hindu texts described with geological precision a real city that sank into the ocean 9,500 years ago, what else are those ancient texts describing that we haven't found yet? How many other lost civilizations lie submerged on continental shelves around the world, waiting for someone to point a sonar in the right direction? Dwarka may be just the tip of an enormous iceberg of hidden history still waiting to be uncovered, or in this case, discovered beneath the sea. But before we dive even deeper into that question, I need to take you to the heights. Literally 3,900 meters above sea level in the Bolivian Andes, where stone blocks with precision measured in tenths of a millimeter were created by a civilization that, according to official history, supposedly had nothing more than bronze chisels. Pumapunku, Bolivia. I've been to many places that left me speechless. Egyptian tombs, Cambodian temples, Greek ruins, but no place in my career has caused as much doubt and intellectual disorientation as Pumapunku. It sits at 3,900 meters above sea level on the Bolivian Altiplano, part of the Tiwanaku archaeological complex, and when you arrive there for the first time, the scene looks chaotic. Giant stone blocks scattered across the ground, as if a giant had kicked over a box of Lego pieces. But then you kneel down, focus on one of the smaller blocks, and look closely, and that's when the disorientation really begins, because what you see is not rough stone shaped by primitive chisels and hammers. What you see are flat surfaces so precise they look machine-milled, perfectly circular holes with uniform diameter from start to finish, and three-dimensional joints that interlock like pieces of a modern mechanical system. You're looking at ancient technology, and it makes absolutely no sense. When I began studying Pumapunku seriously, the first thing that stopped me in my tracks was the result of measurements taken by engineer Jean-Pierre Protzen of the University of California, Berkeley in the 1980s. Protzen used laser levels to measure the flatness of the surfaces of the andesite and red sandstone blocks, and he found tolerances of 0.5 millimeter. 0.5 millimeter, my friend? That's modern industrial machining precision. Today, with CNC milling machines and computerized precision equipment, we can achieve that level. But we're talking about a civilization that, according to the official chronology, existed between 500 and 1000 AD, supposedly using bronze chisels and abrasive sand, and bronze is a soft metal. It doesn't cut andesite, one of the hardest stones on the planet, with hardness comparable to granite. I personally participated in experiments attempting to replicate those surfaces using tools from that era. The result was both frustrating and revealing. We couldn't even come close. Now let me show you the detail that, in my opinion, is the most disturbing aspect of all Puma Punku. And the competition for that title is fierce. Under microscopic analysis, the surfaces of the blocks show no chisel marks, none, on any block. When you work stone with manual tools, no matter how skilled the craftsman is, you leave marks, micro-abrasions, directional grooves, pressure irregularities. They are the unavoidable signature of manual work, but the surfaces at Puma Punku are smooth even at the microscopic level, as if the material had been removed in a way that leaves no trace of conventional physical contact. And the holes, perfectly circular, with a uniform diameter from the beginning to the end of each bore. Any manual drilling into hard stone produces variation in diameter. The tool vibrates, pressure changes, the angle shifts. Puma Punku defies all those physical realities of manual craftsmanship. How? That question still has no satisfactory official answer. The larger blocks deepen the mystery in a way that still keeps me awake at night. The largest sandstone block documented at the site weighs 131 tons. 131 tons of stone that had to be quarried, transported across the Bolivian Altiplano, and positioned with millimeter precision at 3,900 meters above sea level. The nearest andesite quarry lies more than 80 kilometers from the site, across Lake Titicaca. 80 kilometers of transporting stone weighing over 100 tons, without the wheel, without draft animals capable of moving that weight, without any evidence of ramps or leverage systems large enough to manage such a task. Modern engineers have calculated that moving a 100-ton block across uneven terrain would require the perfect coordination of at least 2,000 men working in synchrony. And it wasn't just one block. There were dozens. The logistics simply do not fit within what we know about the civilization that supposedly built this place. What intrigues me even more is the comparison with the Incas, and that comparison is devastating for the conventional explanation. The Incas arrived in the Andes about 500 years after the period attributed to the construction of Puma Punku, and they are widely recognized as masters of stone architecture. Sacsayhuaman, Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, these are extraordinary works that impress any modern engineer. But when you place a stone from Sacsayhuaman next to a block from Puma Punku and measure both, the difference becomes brutally clear. Inca precision, impressive as it is, looks rudimentary compared to the tolerances of Puma Punku. The Incas themselves, according to their oral traditions recorded by Spanish chroniclers, did not claim to have built Tiwanaku or Puma Punku. They said these structures already existed before them, made by giants or by gods in an earlier age. When a civilization of master builders looks at a place and says, "We didn't build this," it might be worth taking that seriously. And here is the question I've carried with me ever since I returned from there, after seeing and studying Puma Punku. If geological erosion analysis proposed by some researchers is correct, and there is serious debate about this, the true age of the site could be far older than the official chronology, possibly predating the last Ice Age event more than 12,000 years ago. That would transform Puma Punku from a construction of the Tiwanaku culture into an inherited legacy, a lost pre-flood civilization possessing an ancient technology capable of producing half-millimeter tolerances and perfectly circular holes in andesite, a civilization destroyed by a catastrophe so complete that only the stones survived. And if that is true, then the Inca culture at Tiwanaku did not build Pumapunku. It found the ruins, just as the Romans once encountered something they also could not fully explain on the other side of the world in Lebanon, a foundation of stone blocks so colossal that not even the greatest empire of the ancient world dared to attempt moving them. Baalbek, Lebanon. The Bekaa Valley sits at about 1,100 meters above sea level in Lebanon, between two mountain ranges that cut across the horizon like natural walls. When I arrived there and approached the platform of Baalbek, I stopped halfway, not from exhaustion, but from sheer impact. In front of me were 3 limestone blocks, each 19 meters long, 4.5 meters high, and 3.5 meters wide, estimated weight between 800 and 1,200 tons each, the heaviest megalithic structures ever moved in documented human history, and they were fitted together with such precision that the blade of my knife couldn't find even a millimeter of space between them. That platform has a name. It's called the Trilithon, and it supports the Temple of Jupiter, built by the Romans in 27 BC. But the Romans did not build the Trilithon. When they arrived here, it was already finished, already ancient, already inexplicable. They constructed the temple on top using blocks weighing 10 to 20 tons, which, compared to the Trilithon, looked like toy bricks. The difference in scale between what Rome built and what Rome found is visible to the naked eye, and that alone is an archaeological mystery that official history has never truly resolved. I walked to the quarry about 900 meters from the site and found something that left me standing there in uncomfortable silence. Lying on the ground, partially cut and never moved, is the Stone of the South, rediscovered in 2014. It measures 21 meters in length, 5 meters in width, and has an estimated weight of 1,650 tons, the largest worked stone ever found on the surface of the earth. Someone cut it with absolutely clear precision and intention, and then stopped forever. What sudden collapse of a pre-flood civilization interrupted that work and never allowed it to resume? The numbers behind the official explanation simply don't add up. Moving a block of 800 tons would require between 40 and 60,000 workers operating in perfect simultaneous coordination, according to calculations by modern engineers. The largest crane in the world today can move about 200 tons, 4 times less than a single block of the Trilithon. And even with unlimited human labor, the terrain between the quarry and the site has irregularities, slopes, and turns that make transport using rollers and levers practically impossible. This is the forbidden history that numbers reveal when you stop accepting the explanation and start doing the calculations. Rome documented every major structure it built. Trajan's column depicts each battle carved into a spiraling narrative. The Colosseum has detailed records of every phase of its construction. The Pantheon bears the architect's inscription on its facade. But about the Trilithon, about the blocks that support the grandest temple Rome ever erected, there is absolute silence. No text, no inscription, no mention. That silence within the hidden history of Baalbek is not a documentation gap. It is a confession. Rome did not know who built that foundation. What fascinates me as an explorer is that the Trilithon blocks are aligned with millimetric precision to the cardinal directions. The same pattern of ancient astronomical alignments I've seen at Göbekli Tepe and Pumapunku appears here in Lebanon with the same deliberate intention. It's not geographic coincidence, it's a signature. The same advanced ancestral civilization, the same knowledge, the same obsession with aligning structures to the cosmos, repeated across cultures separated by oceans and millennia. I left the Bakar Valley with a certainty that no academic book had ever given me. Baalbek is the inheritance of a pre-flood civilization operating with ancient technology so far beyond its time that not even the greatest empire of antiquity dared to tamper with what it left behind. And this pattern of overwhelming grandeur followed by silent disappearance appears again, this time in the middle of the Pacific, on a remote island in Micronesia, where an entire city was built on top of a coral reef using 50-ton stone blocks by a population that barely reached a few thousand people, and whose only remaining explanations live in legends that claim without hesitation that the stones simply flew. Nan Madol, Micronesia. I need to ask you a question before we begin. What is the most unlikely place on Earth to build a city? Think carefully. A shallow coral reef in the middle of the Pacific, hundreds of kilometers from any continent, on an island whose population never exceeded a few thousand people. No metal, no wheel, no stones on the construction site. If you answered, "That place is impossible," congratulations, you are completely correct, and it is precisely there that someone built Nan Madol, one of the most bewildering lost civilizations I have ever visited and investigated in my career. When I first read descriptions of this place, I thought there were mistakes, but when I was there, I saw that the hidden history was simply waiting for someone to look closely to be discovered. I was stunned when I saw the scale of what was built there during my expedition. There are 92 artificial islands covering 170 acres of coral reef. Walls reach up to 15 meters in height and 15 meters in thickness, constructed from columnar basalt blocks weighing up to 50 tons each, stacked without mortar. Only weight and interlocking keeping everything in place. The total basalt transported reaches 750,000 metric tons. I've studied dozens of megalithic structures around the world, from Göbekli Tepe to Baalbek, but this specific number still amazes me every time I consider what it implies in terms of the ancestral technology required to achieve it. Here's the problem that no conventional explanation resolves satisfactorily. Pohnpei Island never supported more than a few thousand inhabitants at any documented period. Archaeologist William Ayres, who excavated the site in the 1980s, found no evidence of ramps, levers, or any mechanism that could explain how 50-ton blocks were raised 15 meters above an unstable coral reef. And the detail that haunts me most in this archaeological mystery: there are no tool marks on the blocks, no cut marks, no manual work grooves, nothing, as if the advanced ancestral civilization that built this place had used a process that leaves no conventional physical trace. Now I need to tell you what I discovered in Pohnpei's oral traditions, because they connect to something far greater than a local legend. When European explorers arrived in the 1820s and asked how Nan Madol was built, the answer was consistent. The stones flew through the air, moved by the founding twins Olisipa and Olosopa. They flew through the air. I know what you're thinking. It's mythology. It's forbidden history being romanticized, and I would agree if it weren't for a disturbing detail. The same description of flying stones appears in oral traditions of completely separate cultures that built other inexplicable structures around the world. In Lebanon, Peru, England, Indonesia, cultures with no contact describing the same impossible mechanism. This is not coincidence, it's an obvious pattern. Official dating places the construction between 1200 and 1600 AD, attributing the work to the Sodeleur dynasty. The conventional explanation is mass labor, stones floated on rafts during high tide. It sounds reasonable until you do the math. Even mobilizing every able-bodied person on Pohnpei, the workforce would be insufficient to move 750,000 tons in 400 years, while the same population still needed to fish and feed itself. And local oral traditions claim that Nan Madol is much older, built when the reef was still above sea level. If that is true, we are looking at yet another submerged city, swallowed by rising oceans at the end of the Ice Age. Exactly the same pattern we saw in Yonaguni, Dwarka, and so many other fragments of this hidden history we are uncovering together. The question I have carried since returning from Nan Madol is simple and devastating at the same time. Why? Why would a pre-flood civilization build an entire city on an unstable reef, subject to typhoons and constant erosion, when solid land was available just a few kilometers away? No conventional answer satisfies completely, and while the Pacific continues to slowly cover the basalt walls of these extraordinary megalithic structures, there is a submerged formation in the Caribbean that combines perfect geometry with a literally fulfilled prophecy, and that connects everything we've seen so far to a word humanity has never forgotten: Atlantis. Bimini Road, Bahamas. I'm going to tell you a story that mixes archaeology, oceanography, and a mysterious prophecy. In 1938, a man named Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, made a specific dated prediction. Atlantis would be rediscovered near the Bimini Islands in the Bahamas between 1968 and 1969. 30 years later, in 1968, zoologist and pilot J. Manson Valentine was flying over the Bahamas when he spotted something striking just 5 meters below the turquoise ocean surface. A perfect line of rectangular blocks extending 600 meters along the seafloor. The prophecy and the discovery converged with a precision that science has yet to explain, and that's how the hidden history of the Bahamas came to light. What Valentine found on that flight changed decades of archaeological debate. The limestone blocks are mostly rectangular, measuring between 2 and 4 meters, resting 5 meters deep in a curved J-shaped formation extending 600 meters. Archaeologist William Donato, who dove the site repeatedly in the 1990s, documented something that conventional geological explanations simply cannot account for: shim stones, small rocks deliberately placed beneath the larger blocks to level them. Nature does not level blocks with shim stones. That is intention. That is ancestral technology operating at a scale geology cannot produce. Here's the detail that elevates this inexplicable structure to a first-order archaeological mystery. In 2005, geologist Dr. Greg Little conducted electrical resistivity surveys at the site, a technique that maps what lies beneath the visible surface. The result was revealing. The blocks do not rest on natural rock. They rest on a layer of artificial foundation, a deliberately constructed base placed before the upper blocks were positioned. This is not beach rock, the skeptic's favorite explanation. Beach rock has no foundation. Whoever built the Bimini Road planned the construction in layers, exactly as any trained engineer would. We are talking about an advanced ancestral civilization with real knowledge of foundation engineering. The official explanation, championed by USGS geologist Eugene Shin since 1978, is that the Bimini Road is beach rock, a natural formation where sand and shells cement in the intertidal zone, creating rectangular patterns through natural geological fracturing. It's a neat, convenient explanation, widely accepted by academia. But it has a fundamental problem that I have pointed out in more than one conference. Natural geological fractures produce variation, irregularity, and chaos, not 600 meters of uniform rectangular blocks aligned along a consistent curve. And the foundation layer documented by Dr. Little, geology does not build planned foundations. This is forbidden history, dismissed for academic convenience. The geological context places this submerged city on a timeline that directly connects to the pattern we saw at Yonaguni, Dwarka, and Nan Madol. Sea levels in the Bahamas were approximately 40 meters lower during the last glacial maximum 20,000 years ago, gradually rising to present levels between 10,000 and 8,000 BC. This means the area where the Bimini Road lies submerged today was habitable land until at least 10,000 years ago. A pre-flood civilization building on this coast would have been progressively swallowed by the advancing ocean, exactly the kind of slow, devastating catastrophe that peoples around the world encoded into myths of great floods. Aerial photographs of the region show additional parallel formations near the main site, suggesting that what Valentine discovered in 1968 may be just the edge of something much larger still underwater. What fascinates me, and frustrates me deeply at the same time, is that the Bimini Road remains in an investigative limbo after more than 50 years of debate. Dr. Little's evidence has never been refuted with rigorous scientific scrutiny. It has simply been ignored by mainstream archaeology, which preferred the convenient geological explanation. Edgar Cayce predicted the rediscovery of lost civilizations in this region with a temporal specificity that has yet to be rationally explained. And down there, 5 meters beneath the crystal-clear waters of the Bahamas, those rectangular blocks remain aligned in silence, guarding the secrets of a hidden history that someone at some point decided the world was better off not knowing. And while the Caribbean keeps its submerged mysteries, we need to cross the ocean to the mountains of the Caucasus, where more than 3,000 stone chambers scattered across 19,000 square kilometers were built by no one, at least by no one any living people still remember. Caucasus dolmens, Russia. There is a type of mystery that troubles me more than any other in archaeology. It's not the mystery of construction, it's not the mystery of function, but the mystery of total or deliberate forgetting. How does a lost civilization vanish completely from the collective memory of a people? The Caucasus dolmens are exactly that. Over 3,000 stone chambers scattered across 19,000 square kilometers of mountainous forests between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and no indigenous people of the region have any memory of building them. The peoples who have lived in these mountains for millennia look at these inexplicable structures and say only, they've always been here. When I investigated these megaliths in person, the first thing that struck me was the geographical scale. 3,000 structures distributed with impressive architectural consistency across hundreds of kilometers of mountainous terrain. This is not a local culture. This is an advanced ancestral civilization operating with coordination on a continental scale. Each dolmen follows the same pattern: massive stone slabs forming rectangular chambers topped with roofs weighing 10 to 30 tons, with a perfectly circular entrance on the front facade. This circular entrance, with a precisely fitting stone cover, is the detail that fascinated me most as I explored this hidden history. Here is the point that separates these dolmens from simple primitive burial chambers. In 2014, researchers from the Russian Academy of Sciences conducted systematic acoustic studies inside the chambers. The results were disturbing. Each chamber has a specific resonant frequency, some in the infrasound range, below the threshold of conscious hearing, yet within the range that produces documented physiological and psychological effects. This is not an architectural accident. This is ancestral technology applied to acoustics with a sophistication far beyond any burial chamber known to conventional archaeology. The official explanation classifies the dolmens as Bronze Age burial chambers, built between 4000 and 2000 BC by nomadic pastoral cultures. Comparisons with European and Korean dolmens suggest cultural diffusion through ancient migrations. It is an academically comfortable explanation, but with serious gaps. The Caucasus dolmens are structurally different from European and Korean examples in size and complexity. And if they are simple tombs, why the deliberate acoustic sophistication? Why perfectly sized circular entrances with precisely fitting lids? This forbidden history does not fit the label of a primitive burial chamber. I observed that some dolmens show erosion patterns that independent geologists estimate at 10,000 years or more of climatic exposure, far beyond the 6,000 years suggested by conventional dating. If this analysis is correct, these megalithic structures are contemporaneous with Göbekli Tepe, part of a pre-flood civilization that extended from Turkey to the Caucasus in a continental-scale cultural network, a network that understood acoustics, astronomy, and stone engineering, and that vanished so completely that even its direct descendants retained no memory of its existence. What exactly happened inside these chambers? The resonant frequencies correspond to ranges used in ritual consciousness-altering practices in cultures around the world. The circular entrances control who enters. The lids seal the interior completely. This is not a tomb. It is a chamber designed to create a specific experience, a hidden history recorded in stone because there was no other way to transmit it. And while the forests of the Caucasus guard their 3,000 secrets, we need to make our final journey to the southernmost tip of Africa, where a stone circle aligned to the stars may be the oldest megalithic structure ever discovered on the planet, built when human history, according to everything we've been taught, had barely begun. Adam's Calendar, South Africa. I need to prepare you for what comes next, because this last site will make you question everything you think is possible in human history. In 2003, pilot Johan Heine was flying over the mountains of Mpumalanga, South Africa, when he spotted something on top of a hill that made him circle back in his helicopter to take a second look. A seemingly simple dolerite stone circle on a remote plateau, 150 kilometers from the ocean. But when researcher Michael Tellinger began investigating the site in 2007, what appeared simple became potentially the oldest megalithic structure ever discovered on the planet. The name given was straightforward: Adam's Calendar. And when you understand why, humanity's hidden history never looks the same again. The circle measures approximately 30 meters in diameter, composed of dolerite stones weighing between 5 and 10 tons each. At first glance, it appears rustic, insignificant compared to the gigantic blocks of Baalbek or the artificial islands of Nan Madol. But the visual simplicity hides an astronomical precision I had never seen before. The stones are aligned exactly to the 4 cardinal points. That's right, they mark the solstices and equinoxes with documented accuracy, and 2 specific stones align with the sunrise on the equinoxes so precisely that any notion of accident is eliminated. This is deliberate ancient astronomical alignment, built by someone who understood the sky profoundly. Here's the detail that makes this archaeological mystery confront the foundations of the human history we've been taught, Dr. Tellinger calculated, using the precession of the equinoxes, the slow rotation of Earth's axis over millennia, when Orion's belt would have aligned exactly with the horizon at the position marked by the stones. The answer, 75,000 years ago. 75,000 years. If this calculation is correct, Adam's calendar is 63,000 years older than Göbekli Tepe, built when Homo sapiens were still in the early stages of their journey out of Africa, supposedly incapable of astronomy, megalithic structures, or anything beyond basic survival. The official explanation dismisses all of this with two arguments. First, the stones are a natural dolerite formation shaped by erosion. Second, if there is any artificial structure, it is a recent cattle corral built by indigenous peoples in the last 500 to 1,000 years. But what about the astronomical alignments? Selected coincidences. Any set of stones points to a star if you choose the right one. It's a neat and convenient explanation, but cattle corrals do not align to the cardinal points with precision. They are built for function, not cosmology, and natural erosion does not place 10-ton stones in a perfect circle on a remote plateau. What keeps me awake thinking about Adam's calendar is not the circle itself, it's the context around it. Current satellite imagery and aerial surveys of South Africa reveal something extraordinary. Adam's calendar is surrounded by over 10 million stone structures visible from above, spread across the region. 10 million structures, channels, walls, smaller circles, systems resembling irrigation or landscape management on a continental scale. This is not an isolated, lost civilization. This is evidence of organized, sophisticated human occupation in South Africa on a scale that conventional archaeology still does not know how to process. And the local Zulu legends speak of sky gods mining gold in these lands in a primordial era, a forbidden history that eerily echoes the exact coordinates where these structures exist. And here we are, after 10 sites, 5 continents, and a journey that has taken us from 11,600 years ago at Göbekli Tepe to possibly 75,000 years ago on this South African plateau. Adam's calendar may be the 0 point of everything, the place where the advanced ancestral civilization that built all the other inexplicable structures we've investigated together began its journey across the planet. Or it may be just another fragment of an immense puzzle for which we do not yet have all the pieces. What I know, after decades of traveling, exploring these sites, and studying lost civilizations around the world, is that the official narrative is full of enormous gaps, and the answers to those gaps are carved in stone, patiently waiting for humanity to finally be ready to hear them. Look, I'll be honest with you about what I've learned after decades of exploring and investigating lost civilizations around the world. The official narrative of human history isn't a deliberate lie, it's an incomplete story built on the evidence we choose to accept and the evidence we choose to ignore. Göbekli Tepe, Yonaguni, Gunung Padang, Dwarka, Pumapunku, Baalbek, Nan Madol, Bimini, the Caucasus dolmens, and Adam's calendar are not isolated anomalies. They are fragments of a global pattern, advanced ancestral civilizations built in stone, mapping the skies, mastering engineering, and wiped out by a cataclysm the entire world calls the flood. These places exist, the evidence exists, and now you also know they exist. So the questions remain. If megalithic structures with impossible precision were built by peoples who, shouldn't have had that ability. What else are we underestimating about human potential? If submerged cities described in ancient Hindu texts were found exactly where the text said, what else is this forbidden history telling us that we still ignore? And if history is cyclical, if lost civilizations have already reached our level or beyond, and were wiped out by a great flood, what does that mean for the civilization we are building now? The answers are carved in stone, waiting for you to explore and discover. The world is full of hidden history, waiting to be uncovered, and this was only the first expedition. There are dozens of other archaeological mysteries, other lost civilizations, other inexplicable structures that we will investigate together. If you've made it this far, you're already an explorer, someone who refuses to accept the incomplete version of human history. So subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and come with me. The next expedition begins soon, and I promise it will leave you speechless.